Welcome back. This is part 2 of my micro-lecture series on plant biology. It'll be a shorter video on how cells interact with each other on the small scale. We'll be relying heavily on the information we learned in part 1, so if you haven't watched that yet or need a refresher, please do that now. Do know also that today I will be using my cursor to show some aspects of the cells we're talking about, so keep an eye out for that. So we left off part 1 with the discussion about the cell wall, and I wanted to save talking about pectin in the cell wall until this micro-lecture. That's because pectin is less important to the structure of the cell wall than it is to binding cells together. The place where cell walls meet is called the middle lamella, and it's pectin's job to cement the walls together to form it. On these two different figures, we can see the close-up from the cell wall, and then the big picture of cells together. This darker line throughout the graphic represents all of these middle lamellas cementing together cells. All right, let's take a quick step back and recall the graphic I used most of the last micro-lecture. These pores you see in the cell wall are Plasmodesmata, or if you're just talking about one, a Plasmodesma. Notice on this other graphic we used, the Plasmodesmata are shown as channels through cell wall and middle lamella alike. Either way, they are bridges of cytoplasm that provide intercellular transport, exchange of substances between cells. This image is a very common way you'll see Plasmodesmata illustrated, but when I see these images, I personally have trouble remembering Plasmodesmata are pores that usually connect multiple cells, and not just a singular chain of them. So if you're like me, keep that bigger picture in mind when you look at images like these. The complex of connected cells via Plasmodesmata is referred to as the symplast, a mass of conjoined cytoplasms. There seems to be some dissent on whether or not the plasmalemma is included in the symplast, as some sources define the symplast as connected protoplasts. Remember, that includes everything inside the cell wall, which includes the plasmalemma. In the grand scheme of things, this distinction isn't that important, but I did want to draw your attention to it if you notice some differences between your textbooks. Transport within the symplast is called the symplastic pathway, where we see substances flowing from cell to cell through Plasmodesmata. Diffusion of these substances occurs via osmosis. The symplastic pathway is semi-permeable, which makes sense if you think about it. To get into the cell in the first place, substances have to pass through the plasmalemma, whether it's part of the symplast or not. Conversely, the apoplast is everything except the symplast. Cell walls, non-living cells, and air spaces are included in this. That's the textbook answer, but I want to explain this more so hopefully it's easier to remember instead of just regurgitating a list of 3 items. Non-living cells do not have a protoplast, and so they're mainly just cell walls, basically plant cell shells. So when we think about the apoplast, we're thinking of a network of cell walls from living and non-living cells and the air spaces between them. The apoplastic pathway is faster than the symplastic pathway since substances are passively diffusing through the cell walls and spaces. It's also fully permeable due to the lack of membranes. Here's 2 comparisons between the pathways. The first one is that classic 2-cell model you see all the time, and the second one is one I really like with a good holistic view. But I've cropped out some labels and parts that we haven't gone over yet since I don't want to mind flood you. In both of these pictures, the symplastic pathway is blue, while the apoplastic pathway is either red or orange. These 2 pathways will be important when we get into root structure and how they absorb water, so be sure to keep these in mind. And that's all we have for today. Let me know if you need more explanation on any of these concepts, and remember, many skin conditions can be misdiagnosed as brown recluse spider bites, even by doctors. So unless you've actually seen the spider, be sure to research other possibilities as well. Knowing the real cause will make treatment much more effective. See you later.